So there's a lot of overthinking when it comes to mix bus levels, and I want to demystify this in today's video. So I'm going to show you how I work my mix bus out when mixing, and I'm also going to show you why I don't gain stage my mix bus the same way I do with my individual tracks. Let's dive in. On this Cubase session, I have my mix bus channel open through the channel settings window. Now pay attention to the level while I'm playing the mix. Okay, so it goes up to minus 5.7 or so dBFS. And this is actually a very good place to land when it comes to the mix bus. The most important thing is not to peak the mix bus. And this is actually one of the main reasons I like to gain stage my session, my tracks, before I start working with plugins. So I can end up at the end of my mix with a good level on my mix bus that doesn't peak my mix bus, because this is something you don't want to do. So give yourself some headroom. The way I like to proceed, and I'm going to explain that to you with this following question that I received a couple of weeks ago. If analog simulation plugins are designed to see minus 18 dBFS as 0 VU, and I use analog simulation plugins on my mix bus, when I need to gain stage my mix bus between minus 18 dBFS and minus 10 dBFS before the signal hits the mix bus plugins. First, if I don't use any plugins on my mix bus, the only thing I need to pay attention to is not to peak the mix bus. So let's say I end up with a signal at minus 10 on peaks on my mix bus. It doesn't matter. If I end up at minus 2 on peaks, it doesn't matter either, okay, as long as I don't peak my mix bus. Okay, so that is the number one rule. Now, when I'm working with some plugins on my mix bus, depending on the plugins I work with, I'm going to need to pay attention to a few things. Now, if I'm working with some digital type plugins, which most plugins are, it's not going to be a problem. I don't need to worry about the levels I'm sending into these plugins. As long as my mix bus is not peaking, the signal that I'm going to send to those plugins is going to be fine. But when it comes to analog type of emulation plugins, now you need to pay attention to some of these plugins. Now, if they are calibrated the same as the analog gear is, you will need to make sure you don't overload this plugin with too much level, okay? And this is where a VU meter can be pretty handy. So I have this free VU meter by Klanghelm. You can download it. Again, check it out. It's totally free. There's a paid version, but the free version works pretty good. Now, this one is calibrated to minus 18. The reason is that minus 18 dBFS is the equivalent of 0 VU, okay? So, for example, let's do a quick test here. So I have my sine wave going into the VU meter that is calibrated to minus 18. In order to have this 0 VU reading on my VU meter, I'm going to need to bring down the level of the sine wave to minus 18, okay? And as you can see, the needle is not moving a notch because a sine wave signal is pretty straightforward. It has a limited amount of dynamic range. It's only one frequency. So what you hear is what you get, basically. So the actual peak level is also the average level of the signal. But when it comes to a signal like a vocal, a bass, a kick, a snare, these are more complex signals, and the average levels will vary from one signal to another, okay? And the VU meter will measure the average level of the signal opposed to a peak level meter like we have on our channels. These will measure the amount of dBFS going into the channel, and it's going to measure in a peak level manner, okay? Meaning that it's going to be very, very fast. It's going to give you the amount of peak level of the channel in a very fast and instant way, okay? So that is the difference between the two. So in order to get an average level of 0 VU, on a regular channel, I'm going to aim between minus 18 and minus 12 or minus 10 dBFS, depending on the signal I'm gain staging. And this goes for individual channels before I start adding plugins on my mix session. This is called gain staging. I have videos talking about that if you want to know more and dive more into it. So once this is done, I know that I'm going to get at a very nice, comfortable level on my mix bus once my whole session is well gain stage. And this is the point we're at right now. Hey, I hope you've been enjoying the video so far. If so, subscribe to this channel, like and share this video. And also, if you're confused about compression, I'm going to encourage you to download my free guide, The Fundamentals of Compression, so you can start working with compression at ease and understand what compression is all about. Again, it's 100% free. The link is down below. Okay, let's get back to the video. Getting back to the sine wave, which again is not as complex of a signal as a vocal, a snare, a bass. Same goes for the signal coming out of a mix bus. This is even more complex than a vocal signal. Okay, now we're talking about a full range signal, way more dense. The dynamic range is not the same. The transients also are not the same. So on a mix bus, in order to get a level of 0 VU, the actual dBFS level of that channel won't have to be between -18 and -12 dBFS. Let me show you. So I'm going to play my mix right now, and this is the VU meter calibrated to -18. And as you can see, it's going above 0 VU, but not by a lot, okay? So I'm probably maybe a couple of dBs over to get like kind of very close to 0 VU in this case. So I'm far away from -18 to -12 dBFS in this case. So if I want to get closer to 0 VU, I would probably have to bring down the channel by a couple of dBs. But again, if I'm not working with plugins, I can leave that as is. But now I want to, let's say, work with an analog modeled plugin. Okay, so let's go with the pre-1973. And it has also a VU meter straight on the plugin. So I will know right away if I'm sending too loud of a signal into this plugin. Let's check it out. And I am. Right now, this is a bit too loud for me, okay? Now, on this plugin, there's no way I can reduce the amount of input level. On some other plugins, I can, like, let's say, the Blackface. This one has an input level that I can bring up or lower, okay, or down, okay, and that will balance the amount of signal level going to the plugin. But in my case, with the pre-73, I don't. So what I'm going to have to do is to find a way to send less signal into this plugin on the way in. So something I can do, if this is the first plugin in my chain, I can just simply bring down the pre-gain level of my mix bus channel by just a couple of dBs in my case. And this is going to do the trick. Okay, so that is one option I can do. I can also use, let's say, that VU meter that also has a trim level and trim that down by a few dBs. So let me just bring back my 1973 plugin and just trim the level down. Okay, and now the actual VU meter, the Klanghelm VU meter, is not what I'm going to look for. I'm going to look the reading of the plugin's VU meter. And there you go. By just trimming that down by maybe 3 dBs, I'm good to go. I can also, instead of using the VU meter trim, I can use a volume plugin or a trim plugin like I have here in Cubase 14 and bring that down by a couple of dBs. You know, it's going to do pretty much the same thing. Okay, so there are several ways you can do so. And when using a volume plugin or a trim plugin, just make sure it goes before the plugin you want to adjust the input level to, okay? Now, when it comes to analog gear, it's the same thing. I need to make sure that I have the right amount of signal going to my analog gear. So I have my Tegler Crème that I'm used to when mixing my mix bus. So this is a stereo bus compressor, and I know exactly the amount of signal I can send into this compressor, not to overload it. And it's set up in a way that I don't need to touch any knobs from the compressor itself. I only need to look at the amount of gain reduction I'm seeing on the meter to adjust my input signal. So I know that in this case, I'm going to need to bring down my signal by maybe 2.5 dBs. And I'm doing that straight from the hardware plugin in Cubase that is connected to my analog gear. And this is what I get. So I'm only looking to get a couple of dBs of gain reduction. And from this point, I just move on and look at the next plugin in my chain. And you know, I have a very good amount of input going into the black box. I'm good. I can then readjust the output level if I'm going into another plugin that I'm afraid to send too much level into. That can be also some stuff I can do, but for the most part, I'm just gonna leave that to Unity point and I'm gonna be good to go. So once I'm done with the mix bus processing, I just need to make sure that I'm not peaking my mix bus. And if I end up at -10, -5, -2, it doesn't matter. Once again, the important thing is that I don't peak the mix bus. So when it comes to the mix bus, don't overthink things up, okay? Keep that simple. Forget about the -18 dBFS stuff, okay? Just like keep your signal between, I don't know, -10 to -5 dBFS, and you're gonna be in good shape. And if you work with analog type plugins or gear for that matter, just make sure you pay attention to the amount of signal level you're sending into these analog type plugins and analog gear, and you're good to go. And from this point, just make sure I have some headroom left to send to mastering. And that's it. Now you need to watch this video if you want to get full control on how to gain stage a full mix session. Until next time, take care and see you.